You're welcome back to the conversation on News Central Television. The first half of the program, we did talk about the Angolan courts ordering the seizure of assets belonging to former president's daughter, Isabel dos Santos. It's now time for us to switch gears and move to developments in South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has filed papers in the Gauteng High Court for an urgent application to interdict former President Jacob Zuma from taking any further steps to give effect to his private prosecution bid against the president. The president is also seeking the court to excuse him from appearing before the court on the 19th of January 2023, as directed by the summons. The National Prosecuting Authority previously clarified the certificates of non-prosecution it issued to former President Jacob Zuma and his legal team were not in relation to Ramaphosa. Zuma launched a private prosecution bid against President Ramaphosa for allegedly contravening the NPA Act on the disclosure of his medical records by prosecutor Billy Downer and journalist Karen Morgan. Ramaphosa's legal team demanded a withdrawal from Zuma's legal team. However, the former president remains unflinching in his stance on the matter. Now, joining me to discuss all of this live from Johannesburg, I have Saul Malobi, business publisher, consultant, and commentator and Brand Africa. A warm welcome to you, Saul, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers at home.
Now, Saul, can you quickly explain the initial charges that Jacob Zuma launched against President Ramaphosa? What's the genesis of this legal battle between the former and current president of the Republic of South Africa?
In fact, to give a context, our constitution gives everyone the right to pursue private prosecution in an instance where the National Prosecuting Authority declines to prosecute anyone facing possible charges. Now, in this instance, former President Jacob Zuma lodged a legal complaint against the chief prosecutor in his corruption trial after he allegedly disclosed his medical records to the general public. And the president then the former president wrote to President Cyril Ramaphosa complaining about this issue. But since a prosecutor is employed by the National Prosecuting Authority, which reports into the Department of Justice and Correctional Services, the president then forwarded that correspondence to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services. But he also wrote to former president to indicate that in terms of the public sector protocols and the architecture, he has forwarded his complaint to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, who will then process the complaint. Now, it ended there. But then, unfortunately, then last week, the former president decided that he was going to institute a private prosecution against the president, since he hasn't taken action against the prosecutor who allegedly released his medical records to the general public. Now, in this instance, then the president responded to say, please withdraw your private prosecution. One, simply because the National Prosecution Authority, in terms of our constitution, hasn't issued an order declining to prosecute President Ramaphosa. So in that instance, it means the former president may not institute a private prosecution in terms of the law. He then asked him to withdraw the charge. And he said, because if he was to pursue this through the court, it will have legal implications, not only for the current president, but also for the former president. And he then said, I will then seek the court's to impose punitive measures in terms of costs against you, meaning that he was to carry his legal costs over and above the legal costs incurred by the president. Now, the president's side insisted that they are going ahead with this prosecution. Then the current president had no other alternative but then to go to court, which means if the former president loses this case, then he will have to pay punitive fees, not only of his legal costs, but also of the president's costs. But I must say, we should also look at this within the context of the ruling party having its elective conference during the past weekend.
I was going to get to that. So this is obviously politically motivated and linked to the ANC presidency. So what does this battle between the two, the former president and the current president, say about the state of affairs within the ruling African National Congress?
Yes, if you look at the internal dynamics within the ruling party, there are a number of interests. I don't want to call them factions as the mainstream media refer to them. Yes, the former president is leading a particular section with vested interest in the leadership of the ruling party. And for that reason, if we look at the timing of these charges being pressed against the president, the legal documents were delivered to the president's house on Friday, a day before the start of the elective conference, which means then that the former president was hoping that the Electoral Commission of the ANC will then ask the current president to step aside instead of contesting for the leadership of the ruling party. So we can't divorce the two from each other, and it isn't a coincidence. It's a concerted effort to ensure that the current president, both of the party and of the state, didn't have the opportunity to contest the leadership of the
So we've clearly established that there's a ongoing battle here between President Ramaphosa and former President Jacob Zuma. They have scores to settle, but these were allies in the fight against apartheid. They've been long-standing members of the African National Congress Party. Are there no internal dispute resolution mechanisms within the ANC to resolve this impasse between Zuma and Ramaphosa? Are there no elders? And have there been attempts to tell both parties to shift their swords?
Yes, the ruling party, like many other political parties in the country, have sufficient mechanisms for dispute resolution. But in this sense, one may obviously see that there was some foul play from the former president's side, in the sense that he didn't exhaust all the internal mechanisms provided for by the constitution of the ruling party. Because in actual fact, he was supposed to lay a complaint with the party's disciplinary committee, and the party's disciplinary committee was then going to investigate the charges, and if there was prima facie evidence to the extent that there was a possibility that the president has erred, they were then going to develop charges against the president. Then they were going through the whole disciplinary process. And at the end, the committee was going to make a finding. And if the current president was not to be happy with the findings against him, in case they found against him, then there's also the appeals committee. And that process alone will take many months to conclude. So for that reason, that's why the former president opted for this short-term approach, which according to legal commentators, it doesn't hold any water.
So, when do we get the results of this interdict that President Ramaphosa wants? And like you said, legal scholars have said, doesn't really hold much water. But when are we likely to get an answer from the courts and see if the interdict will be successful?
Because the interdict expected the president to appear in court on the 9th, and the current president has lodged this appeal, an urgent appeal. This means that our courts should be able to sit in the next few days to resolve this matter before the 9th of this month.
Yeah, so the finalization of the African National Congress National Executive Committee comes up on the 5th of January. How does everything that is playing now in the courts, do you think it will affect the outcome of this NEC?
No, in fact, the NEC process has already been completed. The top 7 were elected, and the 80 additional National Executive Committee members were also elected. What was deferred to the 5th of January was an adoption of the resolutions that were drafted. So this case won't have any impact on the outcomes of the elected National Executive Committee members. And for that reason, I would say that even judging at how the international market responded to the election of President Cyril Ramaphosa for a second term, that gave them certainty. And for that reason, that's why we could even see our currency picking up in value, because that's what international investors are interested in. They are interested in the rule of law. They're interested in political stability. They're interested in the policies that will give them comfort that the economy of the country will be able to grow. And that's the confidence they've given to the current president of the ruling party and also of the ANC.
So all of this is about accountability. Former President Jacob Zuma is just trying to make President Cyril Ramaphosa accountable, as some will say. So if the court decides against this, if the court allows this interdict, what other avenues will be left for President Jacob Zuma, former President Jacob Zuma, on the table to make Cyril Ramaphosa accountable?
I'm not a legal expert, but all I know is that the president of the country can be held accountable for the quote-unquote misdeed of any other public servant. If I am employed as a public servant, I'm given responsibilities, and if I don't carry out my job as per the specifications or I engage in any criminal activity, the president of the country can be held accountable for my misdeeds. So
the South African Constitution does not give...
I don't think it will impact negatively on the president.
So if I hear you clearly, so the South African Constitution does not grant the president immunity from criminal prosecution.
No, it doesn't. In terms of our constitution, and also in case if the former president was supposed to open a criminal case at the police station, and police were to investigate and then hand over the docket to the National Prosecuting Authority, and if the National Prosecuting Authority declined to prosecute the president, is then that they were to get that certificate and pursue private prosecution. So procedurally, this case doesn't hold water. So I don't think it will fly. But over and above that, the Constitution, Section 89 of the Constitution, empowers Parliament, which is which is playing an oversight role to employ mechanisms to hold the president accountable. So in this instance, I don't think this case will apply.
Okay.
Perhaps the former president could have approached Parliament, even though I am not so sure under what circumstances, because he is no longer a member of Parliament.
True. Thank you very much, Saul Melobi, for being a part of the conversation. We do appreciate your contribution and insight to the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good evening.
And this is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of The Conversation in News Central Television. In the first half of the program, we did look at situations in Angola where the court have ordered the forfeiture of properties and monies belonging to former head of Sonangol, Angola State Oil Company, Isabel dos Santos. So we just concluded our conversation on South Africa, where the President Cyril Ramaphosa is seeking an interdict to prevent former President Jacob Zuma from prosecuting him. I'm Benga Borwa. Thank you very much for being a part of today's conversation. See you next time. Bye-bye.